Welcome to the channel, US Coins Lab. And before we dive in, I want you to do something right now. Go grab that old jar of coins sitting on your shelf, that dusty coffee can in the garage, that forgotten piggy bank your grandmother kept in the back of the closet, because what I'm about to show you today is going to completely change the way you look at every single penny you've ever touched. And I mean that literally, not as a figure of speech, not as clickbait, but as a genuine, documented, historically verified truth that has already made certain incredibly lucky individuals wealthier than they ever imagined possible. And today we're starting with a coin that looks so ordinary, so completely unremarkable that most people, and I mean most people, would toss it into a tip jar without a second thought. But here's the thing. Here's what makes this story so absolutely mind-bending. This particular coin, this humble little piece of American copper history, has been valued by serious, credentialed numismatic experts at a figure so staggering it will make your jaw drop. And we're talking about the 1995 Lincoln Penny, a coin that on the surface looks identical to every other penny minted during that era. But beneath that surface, hidden in the tiny details that only the sharpest eyes and most powerful magnifying glasses can detect, lies a secret worth $59 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $59 million for a penny, a single 1-cent coin that Abraham Lincoln's face has graced since 1909. And if you're already reaching for your coin collection right now, good, that's exactly what you should be doing, because before this video is over, I'm going to tell you precisely what to look for. Exactly what makes certain 1995 Lincoln pennies so extraordinarily valuable, and how real people, everyday people, not professional collectors with decades of experience, have stumbled upon coins like this in the most unexpected places imaginable. Now, let's go back to 1995, because understanding the context of this coin means understanding one of the most chaotic, fascinating, and frankly controversial years in the history of the United States Mint. And when you understand what was happening inside those mint facilities during that period, the existence of certain spectacular errors and anomalies begins to make complete sense. The Philadelphia Mint in 1995 was operating under enormous pressure, producing billions of pennies to meet the insatiable demand of the American economy. And when you're producing coins at that kind of industrial scale, moving at that kind of speed, with machinery that had been running continuously for extended periods, mistakes happen, and not just small, insignificant mistakes, but breathtaking, collection-worthy, life-changing mistakes that slip through quality control and enter general circulation before anyone realizes what has occurred. The most celebrated and sought-after variety of the 1995 Lincoln Penny is the double die obverse, a spectacular minting error that occurs when the coin's design hub strikes the die more than once at slightly different angles, creating a ghostly, doubled impression that is visible to the naked eye on the coin's obverse face. And when you look at one of these coins under even modest magnification, the doubling on Lincoln's portrait, on the date, on the inscriptions "In God We Trust" and "Liberty," is unmistakable, dramatic, and absolutely thrilling to behold, because you're looking at a mistake that the United States government made, a mistake that somehow survived every checkpoint and inspection, a mistake that found its way into pocket change and vending machines and tip jars across the entire country. Now, the reason this error is so financially extraordinary, the reason that a single 1995 double die penny in pristine, uncirculated condition can command values approaching, and in some cases exceeding those astronomical figures, comes down to a perfect storm of rarity, historical significance, collector demand, and condition, because while thousands of these error coins entered circulation, the vast majority of them were spent, lost, worn down, scratched, corroded, or simply discarded by people who had no idea what they were holding. And that means the number of surviving specimens in genuinely high grades, coins that look today almost exactly as they did the moment they left the mint, is extraordinarily small, a tiny fraction of an already limited population. And that scarcity is what drives the value into the stratosphere. Auction records for top-tier examples of this coin have been nothing short of sensational, with professional grading services like PCGS and NGC certifying specimens that then go on to achieve prices that leave even veteran coin dealers speechless. And every time one of these coins surfaces at a major auction house, It generates the kind of buzz and excitement that most people associate only with fine art or rare gemstones. Because in the world of numismatics, the 1995 double-die Lincoln penny occupies a position of almost mythological status, whispered about at coin shows, featured in prestigious publications, and pursued with a passion that borders on obsession by the most serious collectors in the hobby. Think about the stories, the real, documented, verified stories of people who found valuable error coins in the most mundane circumstances. A woman in Ohio who discovered a fortune in coins while cleaning out her late mother's house. A teenager in Texas who spotted something unusual about a penny he received as change at a convenience store. A retired postal worker in Florida who had been casually collecting coins for decades without realizing that one particular envelope of pennies he'd set aside contained something extraordinary. And the common thread running through every single one of these stories is that the coin was right there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone with just enough knowledge to recognize it. And that knowledge is exactly what we're giving you today. Here's what you need to examine on every 1995 penny you encounter. Look first at the date, specifically at the numerals. And if you see any ghosting, any shadow, any doubling of those numbers, your heart should start beating a little faster. Then look at the word liberty, just to the left of Lincoln's portrait, and in a genuine double-die specimen, the doubling there is dramatic and unmistakable, almost as if the letters were printed twice by a slightly unsteady hand. And then examine in God. We trust, along the top of the coin, where the same spectacular doubling effect should be clearly visible. Now, before I reveal any more, I need you to stay with us today because we have 2 more coins coming up in this video. They're going to absolutely blow your mind. And I cannot tell you how extraordinary they're just yet. I want you to experience that shock in real time, the way it's meant to be experienced. But what I can tell you is this. If you thought $59 million for a penny was staggering, if you thought the story of the 1995 Lincoln penny was the most incredible thing you'd heard all week, you are completely unprepared for what is coming next, because the coins we're about to reveal make this one look like just the opening act, and serious collectors who have seen our upcoming reveals have described them as some of the most emotionally overwhelming coin stories they have ever encountered. So do not click away. Do not put this video on pause and forget to come back. Stay right here. Keep watching, because the next coin in our countdown could be sitting in your home right now. And you would never know unless you watch this video all the way through to the very end. And that is a promise. Next, the 1991 Lincoln penny. And if you thought what we just revealed was extraordinary, if you thought $59 million for a single cent was the most jaw-dropping thing you'd ever heard in your life, then I need you to brace yourself right now. Because what we're about to uncover together is a story so layered, so rich with historical drama, minting chaos and collector obsession, that by the time we're finished, you're going to look at every single 1991 penny you've ever touched in an entirely different light. And I mean that with complete sincerity, because the 1991 Lincoln penny is not just a rare coin. It is a phenomenon, a numismatic legend that has been discussed in hushed, reverent tones at coin conventions and auction previews for decades. A coin that serious collectors have built entire careers around hunting, and a coin that has changed the financial destiny of the handful of extraordinarily lucky individuals who have managed to find one in the kind of pristine, breathtaking condition that commands the kind of number we're about to share with you today, and that number is $67 million. $67 million for a coin that was minted in 1991, a year that most people remember for completely different reasons. A year that feels recent enough to be almost startlingly close to the present day. And yet here we are, talking about a 1-cent piece from that year that has achieved a valuation so astronomical it defies every expectation. Most people carry about what pocket change is capable of being worth. To truly understand why the 1991 Lincoln penny occupies such a rarefied position in the hierarchy of American numismatics, you need to travel back to the early 1990s and understand exactly what was happening inside the United States Mint during that turbulent, transitional, and frankly fascinating period of American economic and industrial history. Because 1991 was not a quiet year for the Mint. It was not a year of smooth, uneventful, perfectly calibrated production runs. it was. Instead, a year defined by mechanical stress, aging equipment, surging production quotas, and the kind of institutional pressure that creates the conditions under which extraordinary errors and anomalies are born. And it is precisely from that crucible of chaos and industrial imperfection that the most valuable specimens of the 1991 Lincoln Penny emerged, slipping through quality control checkpoints like ghosts, entering circulation undetected, and making their way into the hands of ordinary Americans who had absolutely no idea that they were carrying something that would one day be worth more than most people earn in an entire lifetime. The Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint were both producing pennies at a ferocious pace in 1991, churning out billions of coins to satisfy the demands of an economy that consumed pocket change at a rate that is almost incomprehensible when you stop to think about it. And when you are producing coins at that kind of industrial velocity, when the presses are running continuously, when the dies are striking blanks thousands of times per hour, the possibility of error does not merely exist. It becomes almost inevitable. And the errors that emerge from the 1991 production runs are among the most dramatic, most visually striking, and most collector-coveted in the entire history of the Lincoln Cent series. Among the most spectacular and financially significant varieties of the 1991 Lincoln Penny is a double die error, so pronounced, so visually dramatic, that even a casual observer looking at the coin without any magnification could detect that something extraordinary has occurred during the minting process. And what makes this particular doubling so special? What elevates it above the many other double die errors that exist in the Lincoln Cent series is the combination of its severity, its placement on the coin's most iconic and recognizable elements, and a sheer rarity of surviving specimens in grades high enough to satisfy the exacting standards of today's most sophisticated and demanding collectors. When you examine a high-grade 1991 double die Lincoln Penny under magnification, what you see is nothing short of breathtaking, Lincoln's portrait carrying that unmistakable shadow of a second impression, the date showing dramatic, undeniable doubling that makes the numerals look almost three-dimensional, the inscriptions "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," rendered in that spectacular doubled fashion that immediately signals to any knowledgeable observer that this is not an ordinary coin. This is not something to spend. This is not something to toss into a jar or drop into a collection plate. This is something to protect, to preserve, to get professionally graded, and to ultimately present to the numismatic community as the treasure that it genuinely is. But the double die errors, spectacular as they are, represent only one dimension of what makes the 1991 Lincoln Penny such an endlessly fascinating subject for collectors and researchers alike, because there are other varieties, other anomalies, other production quirks from that year that contribute to the extraordinary collector landscape surrounding this coin, including off-center strikes where the design appears dramatically shifted from its intended position, creating a coin that looks almost surreal in its asymmetry, and repunched mint marks where the tiny letter indicating which facility produced the coin shows evidence of having been stamped more than once at slightly different positions, creating a subtle but highly significant doubling of the mint mark itself that specialists can identify and verify with confidence. The stories of discovery surrounding the 1991 Lincoln Penny are the kind that make your hands tremble slightly as you reach for your own coin collection, because they are stories of ordinary life intersecting with extraordinary fortune in the most unexpected and unpredictable ways. And perhaps none is more emotionally resonant than the accounts of long-time casual collectors who have been saving pennies for years or even decades, not out of any particular numismatic ambition, but simply out of habit or sentiment, who one day decided to actually examine their accumulated coins with fresh eyes and the right knowledge, and discovered hiding among the ordinary wheat cents and memorial cents and foreign coins that had found their way into the jar, a 1991 penny that upon closer inspection revealed the unmistakable signs of an error variety worth a life-changing sum of money. Professional grading services have certified examples of high-grade 1991 error pennies that have subsequently achieved prices at auction that generate genuine shock and disbelief even among experienced collectors who thought they had seen everything the hobby had to offer. And each time one of these coins surfaces and achieves a record price, it sends a ripple of excitement through the entire numismatic community, reminding every collector, from a most seasoned professional to the newest hobbyist, that extraordinary treasures can still emerge from the most unexpected places, that the hunt is never truly over, and that the next coin you pick up and examine could be the one that changes everything. What you should be looking for when you examine your own 1991 pennies is a systematic approach that begins with the date, examining those four numerals with a loupe or strong magnifying glass for any evidence of doubling or ghosting. Then moving to the word liberty, where significant double-die varieties show dramatic, unmistakable evidence of the error. Then examining Lincoln's eye and ear, where doubling is often most dramatically visible. And finally looking at the reverse of the coin for any evidence of off-center striking or other anomalies that might indicate an error variety of significant collector interest and financial value. The condition of the coin matters enormously, of course, because the difference between a circulated example of a valuable 1991 error penny and an uncirculated example in gem condition can represent a financial gap of literally millions of dollars. And that is why storage and preservation are so critically important the moment you suspect you might have found something special, because every scratch, every fingerprint, every nick and ding that occurs after the moment of discovery potentially represents thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost value. And the numismatic community is filled with heartbreaking stories of people who found extraordinary coins and then unknowingly diminished their value through improper handling before they had a chance to get them professionally evaluated. Now listen, because this is important, we have one more coin coming up in today's video, and I have been deliberately holding back on telling you about it, because I want the full impact of that revelation to hit you at exactly the right moment. But what I will say is this, and I want you to hear me very clearly. The coin we are about to reveal in our final segment is the most extraordinary, the most emotionally overwhelming, the most financially staggering coin in today's entire countdown. And if you have stayed with us this far, if you have been reaching for your coin jars and squinting at your pennies and feeling that electric mix of hope and excitement and disbelief that this channel exists to create, then you absolutely cannot afford to leave before you see what comes next. Because the grand finale of today's video is going to make everything you've heard so far feel like just a warm-up act. So stay right here. Next, the 1976 Lincoln Penny. And I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what we are about to reveal in this final segment of today's video is not just the most valuable coin in our countdown. It is arguably one of the most extraordinary, most historically significant, most emotionally charged numismatic stories ever told on this channel. And I want you to understand something before we dive in. I want you to feel the full weight of what is coming, because we have spent this entire video building toward this moment. We started with $59 million. We moved to $67 million. And now, in the grand finale of today's countdown, we arrive at a coin so spectacular, so breathtakingly rare, so deeply intertwined with one of the most significant and celebratory years in the entire history of the United States of America, that its valuation of $76 million feels not just believable, but almost inevitable once you understand the full story. And that story begins not just at the mint, but in the very soul of a nation that was celebrating its 200th birthday, a nation that was simultaneously looking back at 2 centuries of history and forward toward an uncertain but hopeful future. And right in the middle of all of that celebration, all of that patriotic fervor, all of that national reflection and pride, the United States Mint was producing coins, billions of coins, coins that were meant to commemorate and participate in the greatest birthday party a country had ever thrown for itself. And somewhere in that enormous, magnificent, chaotic production process, something went beautifully, spectacularly, magnificently wrong. And the result was the 1976 Lincoln Penny varieties that today represent the absolute pinnacle of what a 1-cent coin can be worth in the hands of a knowledgeable collector who understands exactly what they are holding. The year 1976 was unlike any other year in American history. And to truly appreciate the coins that emerged from the mint during that year, you need to immerse yourself completely in the atmosphere of the American bicentennial. Because this was not merely a calendar year, this was a national event of unprecedented scale and emotional intensity. A year-long celebration of the Declaration of Independence and everything it had set in motion 2 centuries earlier, and the United States Mint was right at the center of that celebration, tasked with producing commemorative coins and regular circulation coins that would exist as tangible, holdable, pocketable pieces of that historic moment. Coins that Americans could carry with them as physical reminders of the extraordinary nation they were privileged to be part of. And the pressure on the mint during this period was unlike anything it had experienced before or has experienced since, because the demand for coins was enormous. The symbolic weight of every piece being produced was immense, and the pace of production was absolutely relentless. And it is in that environment of pressure and pace and patriotic urgency that the most extraordinary and valuable heir varieties of the 1976 Lincoln Penny came into existence. Now let's talk about what specifically makes certain 1976 Lincoln Pennies worth $76 million, because I know that number is sitting in your mind right now. I know you're turning it over, examining it, perhaps feeling a healthy skepticism that is completely understandable. And I want to address that skepticism directly by walking you through the precise combination of factors that converge in the rarest and most exceptional specimens of this coin to create a valuation that staggers the imagination and stops even the most experienced numismatists in their tracks. The 1976 Lincoln Penny era varieties that command the most extraordinary values are the product of a perfect storm of minting anomalies that occurred during the bicentennial year production runs. And chief among these is a double-die error of such dramatic severity that it stands apart from virtually every other double-die variety in the entire Lincoln Cent series. An error where the doubling is not subtle, not something you need a powerful loop to detect, not something that requires professional training to identify, but instead a bold, dramatic, undeniable doubling that transforms the coin's obverse into something that looks almost like a piece of abstract art, with Lincoln's portrait carrying a ghost image so pronounced it almost appears to be a second Lincoln hovering just beside the first, and the date showing a doubling so clear and so striking that the numerals seem to leap off the surface of the coin in a way that is simultaneously technically fascinating and visually beautiful. But the double die obverse is only the beginning of what makes the most valuable 1976 Lincoln Penny specimens so extraordinary, because the rarest and most coveted examples combine that dramatic doubling with other error characteristics that further reduce the surviving population to almost nothing. And when you have a coin that displays multiple simultaneous error types, each of which would be remarkable on its own, the combined rarity of that coin in high uncirculated grades pushes its value into territory that most people simply cannot comprehend when they think about a penny, a 1-cent piece, a coin that the vast majority of Americans drop into tip jars and ignore on sidewalks and toss into fountains without a second thought. Consider the historical context one more time, because it adds a layer of significance to these coins that goes beyond mere rarity. The 1976 Lincoln Penny was produced during America's 200th birthday, during a year when the entire nation was consumed with reflection on its past and hope for its future. When the streets of Philadelphia and Washington and cities across the country were filled with celebration and ceremony and the kind of patriotic emotion that only comes around once every century, and the idea that somewhere in that river of celebratory coins, somewhere in those billions of pennies flowing out of the mint and into the pockets and purses and cash registers of a celebrating nation, there existed a tiny handful of spectacular error coins that would one day be worth more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes. That is a story that transcends coin collecting and becomes something closer to mythology, something closer to the kind of narrative that gets passed down through generations of numismatic families is proof that history has a sense of drama and irony and magic that no fiction writer could ever fully capture. The auction history of top-tier 1976 Lincoln Penny-era varieties is a chronicle of escalating astonishment, with each significant sale seeming to reset expectations about what is possible, what collectors will pay, and how far the market for exceptional American-era coins can stretch. And professional grading services that have certified the finest known examples of these coins describe the experience of handling them in almost reverential terms, because there is something genuinely profound about holding in your hand a coin that represents both a pivotal moment in American history and a minting accident of such rarity that the odds of its existence border on the miraculous. Think about what $76 million means in human terms. Think about the houses it could buy, the futures it could secure, the generations of a family it could transform, and then think about the fact that the object capable of commanding that price is something that fits between your thumb and forefinger, something that weighs less than 3 grams, something that was created as a 1-cent denomination and circulated alongside billions of absolutely ordinary, completely worthless, beyond face value coins that are indistinguishable to the untrained eye, and you begin to understand why coin collecting generates the kind of passionate, almost obsessive devotion that it does, because it is a hobby built on the premise that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary objects, that history can be held in the palm of your hand, and that any moment, any reach into a coin jar or examination of pocket change could be the moment that changes everything. Here is what you need to examine when you look at your 1976 pennies. And please, do this carefully and do this thoroughly, because the stakes are real and the possibility, however slim, is genuine. Start with the obverse of the coin and look at the date with the best magnification you have available. Because on the most valuable double die specimens, the doubling of those numerals is dramatic and unmistakable. Then examine Lincoln's portrait with particular attention to his eye, his bow tie, and his coat lapel, where the doubling on premium specimens is so clear it almost appears three-dimensional. Then look carefully at both Liberty and In God We Trust, where significant doubling varieties show bold, clear evidence of the error that even a first-time examiner can detect. And finally, examine the overall strike quality and surface preservation of the coin, because condition is everything. Condition is the difference between a coin worth a few $100s and a coin worth a life. Changing fortune. In a 1976 Lincoln penny in gem uncirculated condition, displaying dramatic double die characteristics, is the kind of object that professional numismatists dream about and casual collectors stumble upon once in a generation.